My world shattered when I was 5. That's when my biological father passed away in a workplace accident at a construction site. I barely remember him now, just fragments really, his deep laugh, the way he'd swing me around in the backyard, and how he always smelled like coffee and mint. Mom says he was everything you could want in a person, kind, hardworking, and completely devoted to us. They met in their small-town high school, where Dad was the star basketball player. There's still a trophy case there with his jersey and photos from when they won 3 regional championships. Mom was in the drama club, and they clicked during a school musical where she was the lead and he was helping with the stage setup. After graduation, they went to different colleges but somehow found each other again 4 years later at a local diner. It was like time hadn't passed at all. The years after Dad died were tough. Mom had dropped out of college to support Dad's dreams of becoming an architect, so she didn't have a degree to fall back on. She started working 2 jobs at a local grocery store during the day and waiting tables at night. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, who lived nearby. Even through all the struggles, Mom always made sure I was okay. She'd come home exhausted but still find energy to help me with homework or play board games. When I was 7, Mom met someone at her waitressing job. His name was Mark, and at first, he seemed perfect. He had a good job in sales, treated Mom like a queen, and even helped me with my science projects. They dated for about a year before getting married. The wedding was beautiful. Mark paid for everything, and it was the first time I'd seen Mom truly happy since Dad died. The first few months were great. We moved into Mark's house in a nicer neighborhood, and Mom could finally quit her second job. I started at a new school, and life felt normal again. Then Mark's father died suddenly from a heart attack, and everything changed. It started with drinking. Mark would come home smelling like alcohol, missing work more and more. Eventually, he lost his job, but that was just the beginning. The first time he hit Mom, I was in my room doing homework. I heard the crash of something breaking, then Mom crying. When I ran downstairs, she had a cut on her cheek from a broken glass. Mark was apologizing, crying, saying it would never happen again. But it did happen again, and again, and again, each time worse than before. I tried to protect Mom, but what could a kid do against a grown man? Mom called the police a few times, but Mark would sweet-talk his way out of trouble, saying it was all a misunderstanding. We couldn't leave, we had nowhere to go, and Mom was scared of ending up homeless again. The turning point came during a school swimming class when I was 10. I didn't want to change in front of others because of the bruises. When the teacher finally made me, she saw them and immediately called child services. That day, everything changed. Mark was arrested, Mom was taken to a rehabilitation center, and I was placed with a foster family. My foster family lived on a small farm with 3 other kids. They were kind people who gave me my own space to heal. For 3 years, I lived there, visiting Mom at the rehab center regularly. She got better, stopped drinking, and started rebuilding her life. Meanwhile, Mark was in a rehabilitation program too, but he kept getting into trouble there. Finally, when I was 13, Child Services said Mom was ready to have me back. Saying goodbye to my foster family was bittersweet. They'd given me stability when I needed it most, but I was ready to be with Mom again. We moved into a small apartment, and for the first time in years, life felt peaceful. Years passed, and I worked hard in school, dreaming of getting into Pacific State University. When I finally got my acceptance letter, it was the proudest moment of my life. The university was 3 states away, but Mom encouraged me to go. She had a steady job at a restaurant now and had started taking community college classes. I worried about leaving her alone, but she promised she'd be okay. Then, 8 months into my freshman year, Mom called with news that turned my world upside down again. "I've been seeing Mark again," Mom said quietly over the phone. My stomach dropped, and the world seemed to freeze. At first, I thought I'd misheard her, but as she continued talking, explaining how she'd been visiting him in rehab and how he'd changed, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Apparently, she'd been keeping this from me for months. Mark had been released from the rehabilitation center, and when Mom found out he was staying at a homeless shelter, she offered him our spare room. She didn't tell me because she knew how I would react. I lost it. All those nights of terror, the bruises, the threats, everything came flooding back. I screamed at her through the phone until my voice was hoarse. My roommate Alex came running in, thinking something terrible had happened. Well, something terrible had happened. My mom had invited the monster back into her life. I blocked her number that night. For the next few weeks, I threw myself into my studies, trying to forget about everything. But the nightmares came back, dreams where I was that helpless kid again, watching Mark tower over us with rage in his eyes, threatening to kill us if we ever told anyone. I'd wake up in cold sweats, my heart racing. Alex and my other friends noticed something was wrong. I hadn't told anyone at college about my past. I wanted to start fresh. But one night, after a particularly bad nightmare, Alex wouldn't let it go. We sat in our dorm's common room at 3 a.m., and I told him everything. Having someone to talk to helped more than I'd expected. After a month of no contact, I decided I needed to see Mom face to face. I couldn't just leave things like this. During spring break, I took a bus back home. Walking up to our apartment door, my hands were shaking. When Mark answered, I nearly turned around and left. He looked older, thinner, and somehow smaller than I remembered. He tried to say hello, but I walked past him, asking Mom if we could go somewhere to talk. We ended up at the same diner where she'd met Mark years ago. Over coffee, she explained everything. She'd started visiting him in rehab after his counselor contacted her. The counselor said Mark was making real progress but needed support to maintain it. When he was released and had nowhere to go, Mom feared he'd relapse if left alone on the streets. He's different now, she insisted. The therapy, the medications, the counseling, it's all helped. He hasn't touched a drop of alcohol since getting out. I wanted to believe her, but the scared kid inside me couldn't trust him. What if he changes back? I asked. What if one day he snaps and I get a call saying you're in the hospital? Or worse. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I know you're worried, but I need you to trust that I'm not the same person either. I'm stronger now. At the first sign of trouble, I'll leave. I promise. I didn't like it, but I could see she'd made up her mind. Before leaving town, I went back to the apartment and had a private talk with Mark. I looked him straight in the eye and told him if he ever hurt my mom again, I'd make sure he regretted it. He didn't argue or get defensive. He just nodded and said he understood. To ease my mind, I installed security cameras in the apartment, connecting them to an app on my phone. Mark agreed without protest, which surprised me. Maybe he really had changed. After all, when Mom first met him, he'd been kind and caring. Maybe the grief and alcohol had turned him into something he wasn't, and now he was finding his way back. For the next few weeks, things seemed okay. I checked the cameras regularly, and everything looked normal. Mom called weekly, sounding happier than she had in years. Then came another bombshell. They were getting married again. I exploded again. They'd only been back together for a few months, and now marriage? I told Mom she was moving too fast, that she was being reckless. When she defended her decision, I said something I now regret. If you marry him again, don't expect me at the wedding. Or ever. I stopped answering her calls after that. Still checked the cameras, but otherwise cut contact completely. My grades started slipping, and I probably would have fallen into a real mess if it wasn't for Sarah. I met Sarah in my economics class during freshman year. We started dating a few months later, and she's been my rock ever since. She actually found out about my family situation by accident. She borrowed my phone one day and saw all the Reddit notifications from my post about Mom and Mark. At first, she was hurt I hadn't told her, but she understood why I kept it private. Sarah comes from a traditional Asian family, and family stability is hugely important to them. We've been talking about marriage after graduation, but she helped me understand that I needed to resolve things with Mom first. Running away from the past won't make it disappear, she said one night as we sat on the campus lawn. You need to face it, even if just to find peace for yourself. She was right, of course. After 6 weeks of silence, I drove home during winter break, with Sarah beside me for support. The apartment looked different, somehow warmer, more lived in. Mom had planted flowers on the balcony, and there were new family photos on the walls, including some of me at college. The visit was awkward at first, but Sarah helped break the ice. She and Mom hit it off immediately, talking about cooking and Mom's new hobby of painting. Mark kept his distance, sensing I wasn't ready for too much interaction. But I noticed small things, how he'd quietly refill Mom's water glass during dinner, the gentle way he spoke to her, how he'd step out when he felt I needed space with Mom. Later that night, I had a private conversation with Mark. I asked about his plans for the future, what he wanted from Mom. He surprised me by saying he'd been saving up to take her to Greece. She'd always dreamed of seeing the ancient ruins. He also talked about his ongoing therapy, his AA meetings, and his new job as a counselor helping other recovering addicts. That visit changed something in me. Not completely, I still can't fully relax around Mark, and probably never will. But seeing Mom truly happy, watching her laugh with Sarah over old photos, noticing how she no longer flinches at sudden movements, it helped me start letting go of some anger. Now a year has passed. Sarah and I are graduating soon, and I'm planning to propose. We're thinking about moving abroad after marriage, maybe to Japan, where Sarah has family. Mom and Mark might even join us there eventually. Mom started taking online courses in art history, and Mark's looking into international counseling programs. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would think about all this. Would he understand Mom's choice to forgive Mark? Would he be proud of how I handled everything? I like to think he'd want us to find peace and happiness, whatever path that took. The nightmares still come sometimes, but less frequently now. I'm learning that life isn't about forgetting the past, but about not letting it control your future. Mom and Mark's wedding is next month, a small ceremony in the local botanical gardens. Sarah helped Mom pick out her dress, and yes, I'll be there. I'm not saying everything's perfect. There are still moments when old fears surface, when I find myself checking the security cameras more frequently, when a raised voice makes my heart race. But we're all healing, in our own ways and at our own pace. That's all anyone can really ask for. Looking back at that scared kid I once was, I wish I could tell him that things would get better. That although life takes unexpected turns, sometimes those turns lead to places you never knew you needed to go. As Sarah and I plan our future, as Mom finds her second chance at happiness, as Mark continues his journey of redemption, I'm learning that family, in all its messy, complicated forms, is about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to begin again.